Hello, we are Sally and Natalie from Talent Included. Talent Included is an EDI solutions consultancy providing end-to-end support to help businesses drive their EDI agenda.
One of our core offerings supports clients with adopting and embedding inclusive recruitment practices, as we believe this can be the single most impactful element to your EDI strategy that future-proofs your business, positions you as an employer of choice, and ensures you gain competitive advantage.
Our service includes auditing your current recruitment processes, identifying whether you have any inclusive recruitment gaps, and assesses the impact your EDI strategy has on your employee brand proposition. Joe, our trainer, who you'll be meeting shortly, upskills recruitment teams and hiring communities, and our project management team ensure these are embedded throughout your organisation.
My name is Jo Major. I am one of the training partners of Talent Included and also the founder of Diversity in Recruitment. In this short half-hour session, I'm going to talk you through some of the ways that we can connect our DE&I strategy to hiring, talent attraction and recruitment, and also to cover off whether or not we're actually ready to start doing that. So here's a little bit about me before we get going. So, as I said, my name is Jo. I've been in the recruitment space now for over 24 years. I've spent the majority of my career working on the agency side as a recruiter, moved into a learning and development role about 6 or 7 years ago, and at the same time started to take more responsibility for ED&I strategy in the business I worked for and connected that into everything that we did from a recruitment perspective. I now spend most of my time training recruitment agencies and employers and their recruitment and hiring teams, including their hiring manager population. I help them get to grips with all things inclusive, accessible, and equitable recruitment, and help make organisations like yours really understand the fundamentals and the things that need to be in place when we've done all the work and started to develop our overall ED&I strategy, and then we need to kind of like embed that in some of our hiring and TA practices. As you can see here, I've worked in the DE&I space for a significant amount of time. The learning is never done, though. I'm continually on my own education journey. I do various things. I've done some work for the CIPD, for the HR world. I'm an ambassador, a proud ambassador of Recite Me and Flexa Careers. I also get involved as a speaker and a podcaster. I like to talk all things TA and recruitment, and really helping us to understand the power that we have as recruiters to make change happen, and to really think about how we can evolve our candidate experiences, the way that we hire, and improve our results and performance as recruiters. I am a really proud training partner of Talent Included. I've worked really closely with Sally and Natalie for a couple of years now, and I'm a big supporter and advocate of all the work that they do. I always say that I am a practitioner, not an expert, and I am on a mission. I'm on a mission to break down barriers that marginalised candidates face. That is central to all of my work. And hopefully I will give you a bit more understanding of that as we go through the session. Okay, so these are just some of the things that we're going to cover. First of all, I think it's really important that we demonstrate our understanding of diversity and the human experience. Okay, yes, we've got goals as an organisation. Okay, we may have targets and objectives that we want to meet around representation and DE&I. But ultimately, yes, we have to think commercially, but we've always got to centre what we're doing around people who face barriers into work, or barriers in the recruitment process, or prejudice, discrimination because of their background and identity. So that's going to be kind of the starting point of this conversation. I'm going to explain a concept that I've kind of developed called the equity first approach. It will all make sense when we come onto it, I promise. And then after we've done that, I'm just going to kind of cover off some of the things that I really recommend that you think about seriously before you assess whether or not you are ready to start hiring in. So hopefully all of that will make sense, and I'll be able to give you lots and lots of food for thought. Okay, excuse me. So understanding diversity, naturally, I'm just presenting to you and recording this, but if we were in the training room, I would be asking all of you, what do we actually think diversity is? I often ask for that definition. And I really want participants to understand when we say diverse candidates or diverse talent or diverse people, who do we actually mean? Often, I find through my training and experiences and conversations, the automatic go-to areas are marginalised identity, protected characteristics like gender or race and ethnicity. And a key part of my training philosophy is to get folks to understand that diversity is all of us, diversity is everywhere, diversity is you, me, everybody watching this. It's not just about one or two protected characteristics. It's not necessarily, not necessarily, it's really not about the things that we can see. It's not about the optics. It's about people's backgrounds, identities, and circumstances that make us all different from one another. So when I ask people, right, what is diversity? I'm expecting us to think about things like this: men, LGBTQ+, faith, disabilities, race and ethnicity, menopause, chronic or long-term illness, pregnancy, somebody's housing situation, whether or not they've had access to quality education, neurodiversity, mental health, ex-offenders or returning citizens, somebody's class, whether or not somebody's a single parent or a parent at all, people who have been in the care system or people who care for people, people with accents, people from lower social economical status, appearance, the trans plus community, the sector that someone's worked in, the career path that they've had, the employer brand or the type of employer that they've worked for, their experience, whether they've had a zigzaggy career or a smooth career, whatever that may look like on their CV, whether or not people are responsible for caring for other people, the language that they speak, their age, especially if they're over 40, or people that are under 25. What I'm alluding to here is the fact that all of these things on this screen could be a reason why somebody experiences bias, prejudice, or discrimination, or there's a barrier in front of them when it comes to the recruitment, hiring, or application process. So when we're discussing the ways in which we can attract more talent in, we've got to take that really holistic approach. It is my recommendation that we don't just focus on one or two identity markers such as gender, race, or ethnicity, that we understand that identity is intersectional, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these different identity markers that you see here could apply to one person. So in essence, that could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 different forms of prejudice, discrimination, barriers, or bias that person could face. So what we want to do when we're thinking about inclusive, accessible, and equitable recruitment, we're considering all those multiple identity markers and making everything that we do inclusive, accessible, and equitable for everybody. And we're absolutely focused on making sure that none of these things that you can see here are ever the reason why people don't get into our recruitment processes, and that as long as people have got the skills and experience, they should be considered for the role. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So the human experience, as I mentioned at the top of this session, it's incredibly important. And it is my belief and opinion through the work that I do that we sometimes we can lose sight of this. We can become overly focused on targets and objectives and quotas, and sometimes we can decenter lived experience. Only if we step into somebody's shoes and understand what it's like for them in the workplace, or what it's like for them when they're looking for a job, can we start to really consider the work that we need to do to make things easier or more accessible for them. It's really important that we understand that lived experience is a real thing, that even though we as an organization we want to attract more of a marginalised community, it doesn't mean that they automatically feel welcome or they will automatically apply for roles within our organisation. These are communities of people, these are individuals who have probably faced some level of discrimination and prejudice throughout their job search or their previous employment. And just by saying, we want you to apply for a job, it doesn't work like that. There's work to do around creating psychological safety for those candidates. And why is the psychological safety so critical? And why does it have to be part of our talent attraction and ED&I work? Because inequality happens all the time in UK employment. So I'm going to bring you up a little bit of data here. We usually do this in a different format, but I don't just reel off all of this, all of these statistics. When I'm workshopping this, I will work with the team that I'm training to demonstrate what I'm going to show you here. But naturally, because this is just a presentation, it makes sense to do it like this. So this is going to be quite a struggle for some people. I am going to bring up some data that may apply to your own identity, or it might apply to the identity of people within your inner circle, you know, people that you really genuinely care about. So that I'm just kind of going to put that in there. But we've got to face facts, right? We've got to face reality head on if we really want to tackle this. So let's start from the top. 50% of UK adults have experienced or witnessed some form of race, age, gender, or LGBTQ discrimination at work. So that's over half of UK adults at work. 1 in 5 employers are less likely to hire a candidate with a disability. Currently, data tells us between 20 and 25% of the UK working population have a disability. Most people will acquire their disability. I think it's around 86% of people will acquire a disability throughout their career. Okay, so this is a real challenge because this is a huge pool of talent. And don't forget also to consider, you know, the millions of people who have a long-term chronic illness or condition that are not necessarily included in this because they don't see themselves as having an official disability. Disabled candidates are twice as likely to be unemployed as candidates without a disability, and there's lots of evidence around the challenges and barriers that people with disabilities face in the recruitment process. 50% of UK managers feel uncomfortable hiring a candidate who is neurodivergent. By neurodiversity, we mean dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism, Tourette's, just as examples. 1 in 3 employers are less likely to hire a transgender candidate, a candidate who doesn't identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. 1 in 5 LGBTQ plus candidates still feel discriminated against in the recruitment process simply because of their sexual orientation. 1 in 3 candidates have experienced or witnessed racism at work. Very few organisations are taking proactive steps to set themselves up as an anti-racist organisation. Racism doesn't have to be loud and in our face. It can take the form of microaggressions that happen on a daily basis with general interactions between people. But 1 in 3 is a figure that we all need to recognise that there's work to do on. Candidates who are Black, Asian, or from other ethnicity groups, on average, have to send around 60% more applications than their white counterparts. Multiple studies done on this, and the figures never seem to get any better. Just 1 in 3 candidates who are Black, Asian, or from other ethnicity groups feel recruitment agencies will treat them fairly. If you're an employer who uses recruitment businesses for your talent pool, this is something I highly recommend that you consider and think about. Again, it's about asking your recruitment business, what are you doing around race and ethnicity inclusion and anti-racism? 70% of candidates say that age discrimination is commonplace in their workplace. Probably the most accepted and common forms of discrimination that I come across in my work. This is that form of discrimination that I don't think any of us are ever getting away from, right? We're all aging. It happens at both ends of the spectrum, though. I will acknowledge that. 1 in 3 candidates feel discriminated against in their job search because of their class. Okay, so classism, you could say, is alive and kicking. 61% of employers would reject candidates with the right skills and experience simply because they don't have a degree. If we start to think about the percentage of people in the UK, which is around 30%, who have the access to financial resources to be able to get through to university, by having these unnecessary requirements for jobs, we are significantly reducing our talent pools. And many candidates feel really stigmatized because they've not had an opportunity to access a degree education. 3 out of 4 companies are still paying men more than women. Okay, so if you have a commitment to salary equality, if you've reduced your pay gap, or you support things like the Fawcett Society End Salary History campaign, make sure that you're visible with it, right? Include that stuff on your careers page and your employee value proposition and your adverts, because it's critical, because this is still happening. 390,000 new mothers each year experience pregnancy or maternity discrimination at work. On average, there's about 580,000 new mums every year. Over 50% of them feel like they've experienced pregnancy or maternity discrimination. Again, when we're looking at the reason why we don't retain women, or perhaps we're not seeing enough women showing up further down the line in leadership roles, I think it's really important that we understand that it connects directly into this. The motherhood penalty is something that's being talked about more and more. 7% pay gap between mothers and non-mothers, and then a 21% pay gap between women and childless men. And that's obviously on top of things like gender pay gap, ethnicity pay gap, disability pay gap. An interesting stat for you, women perform 75% of unpaid care work, which usually involves things like house administration, looking after parents, looking after the kids, organising all the household duties, in comparison to a man's average of 1 hour 23 minutes. So again, if we're an organisation who's not thinking about flexible or hybrid working, or even flexibility in our recruitment processes, it could be that we're not giving women that equity that they need to be, to perform as well as they could do at work, to have access to as much support as they need in able to do their role, but also be able to do all of the things involved in unpaid care work. 85% of women leave full-time employment within 3 years of having a baby. Okay, ties directly into the retention of female talent. There's the data sources at the bottom. There's so much data out there. This is literally just a snapshot. I always ask people how they feel about this once I've presented it. And out of everything that I talk about, this is the one thing I think that really drives the message home. If we've never experienced discrimination or prejudice, sometimes it's difficult to see, it's difficult to understand or to acknowledge or to appreciate just how deep-rooted this stuff is and how many people it's affecting. When we've got a certain level of privilege attached to our identity, it creates blind spots. Okay, so I was a recruiter for 17 years. I wasn't aware of any barriers that I faced in my career. I certainly don't feel that any of this impacted me because of probably I've got a majority identity. Things changed as I got a little bit older, admittedly. But because I didn't see this or understand it, and nobody had ever had this conversation with me, I wasn't aware that I needed to do anything differently. So I think it's really important that we don't feel uncomfortable with this. We sit with it, we accept it, and we use it, I guess, as our motivation to change what we do. So hopefully you can appreciate that there is a human experience behind every diversity quota goal and objective. I'm not a massive fan of quotas. I believe that we need objectives. We shouldn't be thinking about quotas anyway if we are following the Equality Act 2010 and we believe in positive action over positive discrimination. But I do feel that targets and objectives are important. Otherwise, how do we know we're getting any closer to our goals, and how do we know how to measure? How do we know whether or not our interventions and changes are making a difference if we're not closely monitoring or measuring our goals and objectives? But it's important to think that that behind some of the quotas that we see coming from organisations, people's identity is not just a commodity, right? There's a lived experience behind it, and I'd encourage you, regardless of whatever point you are in your work, just always really make sure that you're connecting the human experience and the lived experience behind all of the work that you're doing, and that's central to everything. Moving the dial on that is the most important thing, not just hitting a quota or be seen to be hitting a quota. Hopefully that makes sense. This is hopefully a useful visual that I usually present when I first start working with an organisation and we're exploring perhaps their current approach or strategy to ED&I. And my philosophy is that we need to start from the bottom. Okay, we need to create the right working environment first. Lots of organisations are very, very focused on hiring in people who are different. They've come to the understanding that there's potentially not enough representation or diversity within their business, and their strategy for changing that is to hire people who are different. Dare I say, hire people who look different into their organisation without addressing the reasons why those people are not present. And what we see with that is not only damaged careers for those marginalised people who are brought in to plug diversity gaps, but also we see employee turnover. We see that revolving door scenario. If we've not addressed the reasons why people are not currently showing up in our organisation, how can we begin to create an environment where everybody's included? So this is my equity first hiring process that I always recommend. What do I mean by that? I think we always need to start at the beginning, right? Equity is all about leveling the playing field. It's about understanding that not everybody has what they need in order to be successful at work in this instance. And it's about what resources can we provide to those people that level the playing field, that give everybody an equal opportunity, which is that equality piece, to perform at work, be successful, get the promotions, get the pay that they deserve, get the recognition, work on the projects that are going to elevate their careers, and be able to manage work and life at the same time. So an example of equity would be, one of my number ones is hybrid and flexible working. Okay, when we have a hybrid and flexible working policy within the workplace, we are enabling people to access work in a way that works for them. Okay, we are not stopping people from being their best selves at work because they can't manage work and home, or they struggle to find balance between their health condition, disability, neurodiversity, and being in the office full time. People start to have choice. They can design how they work in a way that they know will get the very best out of them. And in partnership with their manager, they will get that equity piece that enables them to thrive and be successful. Equity is about the things that we provide our employees. It's about the things that we change in the recruitment process. So it can be anything from a commitment to salary equality, hybrid flexible working, brilliant maternity and paternity benefits, policies that protect people. I'll go into a bit more detail at the end of that. Things like an accessible recruitment process, managers who are trained in inclusion, all of that great stuff. So equity is the doing. This creates equality. Okay, everybody has access to the same opportunities regardless of their identity, background, and circumstances. This creates inclusion. Okay, inclusion is very much a feeling. This is about how people feel coming to work or coming into the recruitment process. Do they feel welcome, seen, acknowledged? Do they feel that they can be themselves? Are they listened to? Are their values taken seriously and respected? This is very much around how empowered we feel to show up at work as our true selves and be able to see and feel and hear that contribution and that difference that we're making. When we feel included, we automatically feel a sense of belonging. The organisations that I've worked with where they've developed belonging doesn't just happen. So those organisations that I've worked with that have done a lot of groundwork to develop a really true, authentic sense of belonging see some massive benefits. They see a reduction in employee turnover, sickness, productivity, innovation, thoughts, ideas, people bringing new and more effective ways of working to the table. Recommendations, that really strong employer brand and employee value proposition, all of that great stuff. And it's my opinion that when we're on that journey, we might not have finished everything, okay, because this stuff takes time. But when we're taking this kind of like bottom up approach, then we almost can identify when we're ready to bring in people who don't currently exist in our organisation, because hopefully we've addressed all the reasons why they weren't showing up in the first place. So hopefully that just starts to get you thinking about how we're actually approaching this, and are we considering all of this stuff. So how do we know when we're ready to hire in underrepresented people? I use that word intentionally, underrepresented. I think it's just a lot more of a true description of the situation rather than saying diverse people. These are folks that are not currently showing up, underrepresented in comparison to potentially certain identities who are overrepresented in our organisation. And this is it's a marathon, not a sprint, okay? And I would really encourage you to work so closely with Sally and Natalie, especially on their kind of like their health checker stuff and their audit work, just to really hold a mirror up to yourselves and like figure out like what needs to be done before we can truly say that we are a great place to work for everybody and we're well into our journey. So I'm going to give you a couple of signs. So there's about 5 signs. So one of the most important things is to understand the data. Okay, when I say data, I mean diversity and demographic data. How do you know you have a lack of representation if you've never asked your people about their identity, background, and circumstances, right? I think it's absolutely critical. All of those things that I displayed, what is diversity at the beginning? We might assume that our organisation lacks diversity, but when did we ever actually ask people about who they are? Okay, this can be difficult sometimes. If you do it in the right way, okay, with the right approach and psychological safety and your surveying and tools and the mechanisms that you use to collect this data, you can gain some really insightful information about who's currently in your organisation. And that's really important, because if we're starting to change the way that we work and we're starting to build an ED&I strategy and we're starting to maybe put inclusive, accessible and equitable recruitment processes together, we need to be able to see whether or not it changes anything, especially if ultimately we want to become a more diverse and representative company to work for. We need to know our starting point so we can see our success rate and we can see whether or not the work that we're doing is changing anything. So that data piece at the beginning is important, and subsequently anybody coming into the organisation. I've also added an extra bit there around understanding how our people experience the business. Okay, what do I mean by that? Do people feel included? Do they feel that they've got the same opportunities to everybody else? Do they feel that you have a fair promotions and salary policy? Do they feel that your organisation is discrimination and prejudice free? Or do they feel that their identity or their background or their circumstance has held them back? Do they see other people around the organisation succeeding when they are not? Do they feel that they have been unfairly treated? This stuff can be really uncomfortable to uncover. And I've been through this journey with many of my clients, but lifting the bonnet and understanding some of this stuff is critical, right? Because we want to change, and yeah, it might make us feel uncomfortable, but if we don't know, we can't do anything about it. So it's important that we understand the diversity and demographic data, but we can also compare and contrast that with how those individuals navigate our working environment. I want to be able to understand how everybody of all different identities feels about work. And if we use the right measurement tool, we can start to look at the identity and its relationship, the identity of our employees, and its relationship with how they feel about working for the business. Okay. Sign 2, we understand the focus must be on positive action. Okay. A lot of organisations do not understand the difference between positive discrimination and positive action. Okay, positive action is a lot more of a strategic approach. This is about us thinking about all the ways in which we can develop hiring strategies that will appeal and attract marginalised communities or candidates that don't currently show up in our talent pools. It's not about us just focusing on somebody's protected identity and pursuing them to join our organisation. Positive action is not about making somebody's identity the main factor as to why they get shortlisted or subsequently hired. It's about all those things that we can do around equity in the hiring process. This is a document that's been pulled together a couple of years ago by the Equalities Office, and it's really, really useful. And it will give you some guidance on how to use positive action in recruitment. It will also, I would recommend that you get really, really clear on what positive discrimination looks like, and also positive discrimination and its connections with the Equality Act 2010 and the setting of quotas and targets. A lot of the work that I do when I'm doing my inclusive, accessible and equitable training is really tapping into positive action strategy and building up a complete suite of positive action initiatives that feed into our talent attraction strategies and our recruitment and hiring processes. This is the stuff that will get you to where you need to be. Setting a quota will not. It's performative. It's essentially against the law, okay? But this is the stuff that takes time and takes resources and takes learning and development and training. But over time, it will change the demographic makeup of your organisation and make you an employer of choice for everybody. Sign number 3, we feel confident that we are on a journey to create true inclusion, equity and equality for our employees. If we haven't addressed some of the challenges that we may have, and all businesses have them when it comes to inclusion within our own organisation, why on earth are we trying to bring in people who could face even more challenges? This stuff takes work, and it is not about having all our ducks in a row and everything completed, but it's about us having an authentic ED&I strategy and a roadmap of actual actions, not just fancy words and something that sounds and looks like a beautiful marketing document, right? It's actually making sure that we can clearly articulate the 10 things that we did in 2024, the 10 things that we've done in 2025 or we have planned for the new year, okay, when it comes to equality, inclusion, equity, within our organisation. We need to be able to articulate these things. They're tangible, okay? They're not just passion and interest and commitment, they're actual actions, and it's all about being prepared to make changes to our processes, to our hiring strategies, to our policies, to our benefits, to everything around all that ecosystem around the employment and recruitment experience. So again, as having a little bit of a reality check, are we ready, or have we got a little bit more work to do with Sally and Natalie? Sign 4, absolutely critical. Of course, I would say this, I'm a D&I trainer, but training hiring managers in inclusive, accessible, and equitable recruitment practice is fundamental. When we're looking for more diverse talent, more representation, when we're looking to bring in people into the recruitment process that don't necessarily show up or haven't shown up before, if we do the same things that we've done for years and years, we're just going to have the same results. So we've really got to do an audit of our recruitment processes, and it's not about just giving a new framework out to your recruiters and your hiring managers. There, we now have a new framework and a new way of doing things. If you could just follow that, in my experience, if we just bring in new interventions and expect people to change, we'll be waiting a long time. Hiring managers need to understand the why. We need to build their confidence. We need to build their skill set, their knowledge and their know-how, and give them the education to understand why the things that we're asking them to do will make a difference. So if training for your hiring managers is not in your ED&I strategy, I would really start to think about that, how that could impact your organisation's goals when it comes to your recruitment and diversity objectives. In Sign 5, this all kind of ties into the talent attraction strategy stuff that I train on. It's really critical that we understand what underrepresented candidates may want to see from us in our hiring processes. That might be from our job descriptions, our employee value proposition, our employer brand, our careers pages, the way that we pre-screen them, the adverts that we put out, the way that we interview them, the way that we feed back, the way the assessments, the forms, the tests, whatever it might be that's involved in that recruitment process. We need to understand what changes candidates want to make. What are we doing to break the status quo? What are we doing to be different from everybody else? What are we doing to fix broken recruitment processes that create barriers for marginalised candidates? And again, this is about us understanding lived experience, listening to stories, case studies, and really applying all the interventions that we're building and putting together for our inclusive, accessible and equitable recruitment process, and understanding which communities are going to benefit from that. Okay. It sounds a little bit complicated, but it's not. It's really, really interesting stuff. And when you do this with everybody involved in the recruitment process, we start to see those light bulb moments. It brings everything to life. Okay. It's really interesting for people when they understand the reasons why things are changing and evolving. Finally, I would always recommend that you seriously consider or review or audit the types of benefits that support the candidates that we've discussed. This is just some typical quick examples of what I regard as inclusive benefits that provide equity and level the playing field, inclusive benefits that underrepresented candidates may be interested in. We also need to consider, have we reviewed our policies? Have we got everything in place? Or are we on our way to getting things in place that protect people? Again, if we're bringing in people into the organisation who are currently not showing up, is it possible that we might have to create more policy around this? Is it possible that we might need to educate our workforce and hiring managers and leadership team on these policies so that they don't just sit in a handbook somewhere, that they're lived through our values, for example? I'm not going to go through all of these, don't worry, and I don't expect you to have all of these, but I genuinely believe that we need to go beyond our equal opportunity policy. If I'm a marginalised candidate and I'm interviewing for a role in your organisation, I'm interested in this stuff because I want to know how I'm given equity. I want to know how I'm going to be protected. I may have had experiences where there was not a policy that protected me, and now I'm acutely aware that that's something that I need to look for. So again, just about understanding where we're at and what we have and how we communicate that with candidates. And then finally, an authentic D&I strategy. When I say authentic, I mean a strategy that actually does something, that changes things, that has resources, that has money behind it, that has somebody who's driving the strategy, that has a leadership team that's really bought into this stuff. This is something that I know that Sally and Natalie will be able to advise on. And it needs to be achievable. We don't need a strategy for the next 5 years. See this as a roadmap. Assess where we're starting from. What can we realistically achieve? in the next 12 to 18 months, okay, that will be our strategy. And what does that involve? This is not just about words on a paper. This is about the things that we can do and support as an organisation that will change people's experiences of not just the recruitment process, but working within your organisation. There's some further reading here. I know you're probably speaking to Sally and Natalie about this stuff already, but I would massively